Mr. Young, we are recording and we are live. Go ahead.
All right. Well, good evening to all of you again. Welcome back to our third budget meeting. We do have a few items here during our public portion of the meeting, and then we will be going into an executive session to talk some personnel items in regards to the budget. The first two items that we have, I did want to have a discussion on full day kindergarten. I know that was something that had come up in Ken's request to the board about potential items we hadn't already looked at. And I know Eric, did some work to take a look at those and show you exactly what we're seeing right now. So I'm going to turn this first portion over to Dr. Eschbach.
Thanks, Jason. I'm going to share my screen just to kind of go through this. So back in February, when we made the proposal for full day kindergarten, I shared a slide that looked like this. And I explained to the board at that time that there was a lot of unknowns going into starting a full day kindergarten program. Probably the biggest unknown is the number of students that we would have. So I presented this as a quote unquote worst case scenario in terms of the finances behind starting this program. And in this scenario, we were looking at the possibility of adding 3 classroom teachers, 3 instructional aides, increasing some time for a specialist, and then all the furniture, software licenses, and so forth that went along with that. Those would be the expenses, but we were saving a significant amount of money on not running a midday kindergarten bus run. So when we parsed this out, we were looking at just over $200,000 as a possible cost for starting the full day kindergarten program. And I know as we got into concerns about the budget and about what may be lying ahead, there was conversation that maybe now is not the time to start full day kindergarten. I explained to the board earlier, and I wanted to share it publicly, that our picture has changed as far as the number of students that will be attending. So we are now looking at a scenario that looks more like this. Based on the numbers we are seeing through the census data and through our actual enrollment in kindergarten so far, we believe that we can run one of 2 models. In this one, I'm calling this the 4-3-2-2 model, which means that there would be 4 classrooms at Dillsburg, 3 at South Mountain, and 2 each at Northern and Wellsville. In this model, because we already run an intensive speech and language program, which is a full day model, and we already run an extended day kindergarten program, which we would not need to run anymore in the full day model, we would only need to add 1 additional teacher. We're using the round figure of $82,000, which would be salary and benefits for a professional staff member. We would only need to add 1 instructional aide. We do have a part-time kindergarten teacher who would go to full-time. No need to add any additional specialist time in the model that we would run, and only adding furniture, software, laptops, and so forth for 1 classroom. So I show over here to the right the personnel increases of $129,000, but $118,000 in savings for transportation. So the fact that we're not running these midday runs saves us $118,000. So if we were going to go with the 4-3-2-2 model, this would be, there would only be an increase of $19,000 to our existing staff. Now I wanted to show what that would look like as far as enrollment goes. So the enrollment
that I think is really important
the enrollment here is our the current enrollment that is listed. These are students that have actually enrolled. So in the 4322 model, we would have an average class size over here at Dillsburg of 16, South Mountain 18, Northern between 19 and 20, and Wellsville 13 and 14. So you can see Wellsville is a small cohort right now. We have a total enrollment right now of 184. Compare that with our the kind of the average class size that we have in the elementary schools of around 220. And you can see we have a significantly smaller population. But the colored boxes here, I say, look, if we had to in this model, how many more students could we enroll in each building that would get us into the not to exceed range and kind of the middle of that range, so 23 students in a classroom. So you can see in this model, we can assume 71 total new students, and which would put us at 250 students for that class, and not have to change things. And at Dillsburg, being the largest gap, we could take 30 more students just at Dillsburg and stay at that 23 mark. Now, in a kindergarten program, we like to have closer to 20 students in a classroom, but we also realize that these are, we've got a tough budget here, so we looked at another model. The next model we looked at was a model, what we call the 3322 model, which is 3 classrooms at both Dillsburg and South Mountain, 2 classrooms at Northern and Wellsville. We're still going to need an additional instructional aid, and that cost at $13,760, and an increase in our kindergarten, our part-time kindergarten teacher to bring her to full-time. But everything else goes to zero. We don't need to add anything. So now we're talking about personnel increases of $47,000. Balance that against the transportation savings, and by going to the 332 model, we're actually saving the district $71,000 over the current budget. What does that look like as far as enrollment goes? That pushes the class sizes up a little bit. So at Dillsburg, you're having 21, 22 students in a classroom, still not at the 23 mark. We could only take about 5 more students at Dillsburg in this model to get us to 23. Everything else stays the same. We could take 15 students at South Mountain, 19 students at Wellsville, and in this model, we could take a total additional total of 46 students to keep us at an average class size of 23. So I wanted to share that with everyone, because there's the assumption out there that you know, we're spending a lot of money on full day kindergarten, when the fact of the matter is, because of the cost savings that are associated with transportation, in the first year we're actually saving money, or spending, if we go with the 4322 model, just spending less than $20,000. Now, I do want to make this note. This is for next year. In subsequent years, we know, if history holds true, that our class sizes will go up again. We always have bubble years, and so I anticipate that there would be the need to add additional classroom teachers. Also, in the second year, if you recall, transportation revenue that we get from the state in reimbursement of transportation always lags a year behind. So in the 21-22 budget year, we would be getting reimbursement from the 2021 school year, and that reimbursement is at 50%. So our revenue in the 21-22 school year is going to go down by about $55,000. So you need to take that into account as well. But for this coming year, we're talking about either an increase in costs of about $20,000 or actually a savings of $71,000. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about that.
Hey, Eric, this is Greg. Do you have a recommendation yet, or are you going to still wait and see as we get more students that enroll, which one of these models we're going to need?
So we do have a recommendation, and our recommendation at this point in time is really to move forward with the 4322 model, and I would kind of defer to the board as to what their desire would be here. We could move forward with 3322 with the understanding that generally we get more enrollees over the summer months. And as you can see with that 332 model, we can only take about 5 more students at Dillsburg until we start to push the top of that range. So then we have to make decisions like, okay, does any new student that enrolls in the district, do we bus those students down to Wellsville or to South Mountain based on the fact that they can consume more? So my recommendation at this point in time is to build the budget with the 4322 model, with the potential that we wouldn't need to hire that 4th kindergarten teacher at Dillsburg if the numbers don't warrant it. I guess I've always operated under the wanting to build a budget that that we could potentially save on, instead of building a budget that we would have to come back and spend more than what we've budgeted. So I would hate for the administration to come to the board in August and say, you know, when we were talking about that 3322 model, well, it didn't hold true. We had 40 students enroll over the summer, and we're going to need that 4th person. I know we didn't budget for, but we're going to need it. I think I'd rather come to you and say, hey, the numbers did hold true. We can stick with 3322. We won't need that to hire that person this year, and that's just cost savings.
Okay, thanks, Eric.
You bet. Any other questions?
Dr. Eschbach, if I could also add, I've been working with the elementary principals as well, and Mr. Young, and just looking at our class size model across all grade levels, and looking at potential transfers. As you'll be seeing Tuesday night, there'll be some transfers on the regular board meeting as a result of some of the people that are moving around. But we have identified a couple other positions where class sizes are right now relatively low, and we could reduce a position and repurpose that position for kindergarten, and really make it, again, budget neutral to possible savings because of attritioning a position for next year's budget. As you know, with those positions, they're all enrollment dependent. So the next grade level that's behind it, as we have sufficient enrollment, we need to staff it appropriately. But that is something that we're also looking at, just to kind of add to the conversation.
I would just like to thank Dr. Eschbach and his team for putting this together. I mean, that's surprising to see numbers like that we can pull off full day kindergarten at such a reasonable cost. So kudos to you folks on a job well done.
Thanks, Ken. And honestly, this is not unusual when school districts move in this direction to see savings, whether it be in transportation costs. We've talked to school districts that have seen significant savings in the number of students that are not going to cyber charter schools and so forth. So this is just the savings we know. There could be additional savings as well.
Hey, Ken, this is Greg again. If you don't mind me adding, just for new board members, just because we talk about a lot of these issues through the budget process, and I know there's been a lot of talk about full day kindergarten, we wouldn't be able to postpone the implementation of full day kindergarten unless the board took a vote at a regular board meeting to do that. So there's a lot of things that we're considering or talking about, but ultimately we are going to have to vote at regular board meetings to implement policy changes or accept a administrative recommendation. And so I guess before we get caught up in a bunch of this stuff, I mean, there's a lot of other things that have to happen procedurally before any of this, takes place.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, once we get the final plan in place, then we will do what we have to do and change whatever we have to change.
Okay, if there's nothing else on that, we'll go to my next item here. And hopefully I can share. Fortunately, this did not pull up the way I was hoping it would. So I did want to revisit the discussion from last meeting with the buildings and grounds discussion in regards to some of our near-term capital projects that need to be done. Specifically talking about the natatorium at the high school, the Bostic Stadium lights, which we've deferred now for a few years, as well as the SLC, which is not necessarily a defined project yet, but I know we all understand that something needs to be done with a part of that building. What was proposed last week was that there would be a budget transfer of $200,000 to complete the Bostic light project. So we have 200 in capital reserve right now. It would take another 200 to finish that project, and that was proposed to be put into the capital reserve fund via a transfer. So I know there was talk last week as well about doing only security items or safety type of items, and is there any deferment that can be had? We've given that some more thought, and I've tried to see other ways that we could potentially get some of these things done. And I'll be honest with the board. I think all three of those items, the Bostic lights, the natatorium, and the SLC, are items that need to be done fairly soon. I certainly, from a safety standpoint, we know what some of the exterior of the SLC looks like. The natatorium is only a matter of time before things start to fail, and we get into a more emergency situation than a planned situation. And I don't think any of us like to work under an emergency situation. So I would like to propose maybe tackling that another way. And I'm going to leave the turf field out of those items for the time being. I do want to show some more information on that as well. And I know Dr. Eschbach, I think, has a few more things to discuss in that regard. But I'm going to go down here. I know I had shown you a real high level debt structure for these projects. And this debt structure here is for $3.3 million. And that would be to cover the three items that I talked about: the natatorium, the lights, and the SLC. So what you'll see here in terms of increased debt service year over year would be an interest payment of $87,000 that would need to be added to the budget. This follows our wraparound structure, so you can see the principal gets wrapped around here towards the end of our existing debt. So this, as I said, this would include the Bostic lights. So what would that mean? That would mean we can reduce the transfer to the capital projects by that $200,000 because we're going to be financing that project instead of paying cash for that project. So you would actually have a net negative to the budget of about $110,000. Because again, we're removing the $200,000, but we'd be adding this $87,000 in interest. So the other piece to that that we could potentially look at it if we wanted to, it's a little bit more aggressive way of financing things, but it would be to actually have our first year be net neutral, and we would finance the interest payment, basically saying we'd be taking $3.387 million out in the debt, and then that first interest payment next year would actually come out of the new money we would be getting in that debt. I'm not a big fan of that, but it is an option if we wanted to look at a budget neutral option for next year. But I think it gives us a way to be able to continue doing some of these projects that we've been talking about, that we know need done. We can plan for these. I know it was talked about the natatorium, wouldn't be done probably this summer. I'm sure it won't. We'd have to go through a bidding process and all that. So that's probably more like a spring or even next summer type of issue. The SLC, we can get a plan and certainly start that at any point. Since there's, we don't have people in a good portion of that building other than figuring out how we were going to deal with the storage area of that. And certainly there's a lot of discussions to be had around how we plan all of that. And then also getting the Bostic lights done for this summer. So we're good to go for this fall. So the lights is the most pressing item that would need to be done this summer. The other two would probably be items we wouldn't do until calendar year 2021. So with that, I did have some discussions with Mr. Schreerly as well on the lights. I guess the other option is to go with what was brought up on Thursday of last week, and that's basically to do nothing and don't take out any new debt, don't do the transfer. Can we hold off on the lights for another year? I mean, as we said, they are going to fail. They will fail. I think both Matt and Jerry are under the assumption that they won't make it another year. Could we get lucky? I suppose we could. But Jerry said he would be willing, if given the guidance and the direction, to look to schedule things in the afternoon and football games on Saturdays afternoon and things like that, if we had to defer the lights for one more year. So he has given that some thought, said that would be an option. Frankly, I would prefer we look at what I'm showing you here and taking out about $3.3 million and doing these three projects here in the next year or two. The two positives as well with that right now, the interest rates. Let me go back up here. This is provided by PFM, our investment and bond advisors. So here you can see, and they show the board this for those that have sat through a PFM meeting before, but historically, here's 1993, where these interest rates have been over the past so many years, about 27 years, I guess it is. And then here they blow up kind of the more recent interest rates over the past about year and a half. And you can see here where we're at. Certainly there was market volatility here with COVID, but they've settled now down extremely low. So we'd be getting an extremely competitive interest rate on $3.3 million, as well as we've been hearing some things, and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder from the discussion in a little bit, but the contractors are also, their schedules are starting to lighten up here a little bit. So I would hope a bid on these projects would be coming in potentially less than what Crabtree has estimated, given where things are at. So it would be my recommendation that we give this another hard look, and we look to do debt to do both or all three of the projects, the lights, the natatorium, and the SLC. So with that, I will let board members ask questions. Oops, that's not the right one.
So Jason, this is Greg. Just, I guess, for new board members, again, we can't do any of these projects until we fund them. Correct. And just because we fund them doesn't mean that we're going to do them, because we still have to put a project out for bid, accept bid results. So are you suggesting that we do a bond issue and we have some time whether or not to take those funds, so that we're not actually incurring the debt service till we actually move forward with the project?
So I think what we could do to answer that question first, we would be looking actually at a bank note. We would not be doing bonds. PFM for this amount, the 3.3 million, and for the flexibility a note gives us, as well as the current interest rate environment, we'd be looking at doing a bank note. And we have done that before. It actually worked out for us. We had it for a few years and then we're able to refinance it at a lower bond rate. So this would not be a bond. This would be a bank note. It also it comes with lower issuance costs as well, going through a note. So then the second point to that is, yes, I mean, we could hold off. This would basically be if we took this debt out here in the fall. I mean, we could certainly wait and do that come, more maybe January, spring. That would affect the interest rate, certainly taking that down. As you can see, if we took this out, I think he determined we take this in July. We'd have this interest payment in November. If we waited until, say, January, you chop off half a year's worth of interest, and so maybe we'd probably be paying closer to $50,000 in interest instead of the 87, and plus that gets us closer to when those projects would actually be coming up to be done. So the timing of it absolutely needs to be discussed. I'm not saying we take this money and sit on it for 12 months, but I think we need to be prepared to move forward next year, and I would have to build in some interest costs. And if we were not going to be doing the lights through a transfer, obviously I'd want to take that money out of the budget. So I'm not saying this is exactly when we would take the money and exactly what we would do next year. I guess I'm proposing that this is how I would like to go forward. And then the timing of it obviously could be, 6 months off, delayed, if you will. In terms of the lights, potentially we could do what we have done in the past in terms of doing the project and then getting reimbursement for that project once we have the funding. So we just did that for the roof at Northern Elementary. We started that project prior to having our bond funding. And then what we're able to do, the board can pass a resolution that just says the bonds, once they're taken out, we're able to reimburse the general fund for money that they're pretty much putting up front. So what I would probably do here is use 2 of the 400,000 that we already have in capital reserve and pay for half of those lights, potentially take the other 200 out of general fund balance, and 6 months later we'll turn around and reimburse ourselves. Or if we wanted to do the full 400 as a reimbursement, we could certainly, do that as well. So I wouldn't want to take 3.3 million out just for the lights and then sit on the rest of it for 9 to 12 months until the other projects are ready to go. So long-winded answer to your question, but that's the timing that I'm probably looking at there.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is Beth. So if we do wait, we take out enough for the lights and then we do wait, the interest rate is likely to go up, right? I mean, that's what you're saying. I guess I'm confused because you say 3.3 million, but we'll do the projects in the spring, but we're not going to get all the money. So what does that mean for our interest rate?
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody can say what exactly is going to happen with the interest rates. It's a market and it'll fluctuate based on.
No, I know.
I don't think anybody's anticipating a massive bull market in interest rates over the next 6 months. Could it go up a little? Sure, it could, but I think we're still going to have I'll pull that back up. I think we'll still have very respectable interest rates 3, 4, 6, 8 months from now.
Okay, that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see where it's been, pre-COVID here. It had been coming down since the beginning of 19, all the way through fall of 19, and it was fairly flat there until obviously this craziness that just happened here the past month.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So Jason, this is Ann. I just have a question. Excuse me. So we know that the lights have been on our radar for quite some time at Bostic.
Yes.
And we know that the SLC has been on the radar and the insurance provider has indicated that this is a potential liability and we should look to address it. But I thought my understanding was listening to Matt with the natatorium. Yes, it's bad and it needs to be looked at, but that we were still kind of okay at this point. Are you saying that you're now looking to bump that up and address that sooner rather than later?
I think Matt was speaking to the comments of, can we wait another year? And I think, ultimately the answer would be yes. But again, none of us know when that system will fail. And we could see ourselves, like I said, in an emergency situation. I mean, I can tell you some of the items in that space outside of the HVAC system are deteriorating greatly. So as you saw in some of those pictures, and as I think Matt said, the stands are failing inspections. Our scoreboard, I know Jerry has had that on his list for a few years. That's in desperate need of replacement as well. I can't sit here and say it's going to last, and Matt doesn't know either. He would do his darndest if the board were to say, nope, we don't want to take out that, we don't want to spend money on it, we're going to wait a year, and we'll revisit this a year from now. He would do his best to make that happen, and it could happen. But we're delaying, frankly, the inevitable. This project needs to be done. It's a maintenance project for an item that we have in this district that we need to address. So can we wait? We could wait. And I think that's what Matt was saying. He would do what he could to make sure we can, continue to do what we need to do in that space, but that's not a long-term game plan.
Yeah, Jason, this is Jason. Just to add to that conversation, and back in January, we had a pump fail in the natatorium, and the water temperature would not get above 73 degrees. And we waited 3 weeks to get retro parts to bypass the existing pump and divert the water through another heat exchanger. And we were canceling classes in the natatorium during that period of time because there was nothing we could do until those parts arrived on site and maintenance could get them installed. So this system is end of life, including the HVAC system and some of the electricals and the bleachers, as you heard. They're above 20 years, and we have already this year felt the pinch of reacting to an emergency and losing that pool for about 2.5 weeks time. We were kind of touch and go every day.
Hey, Ann, this is Greg. I can tell you that HVAC equipment is a 16-week lead time item. So you're looking at 4 months from the time a contractor orders it before it even shows up on site. So in the event that the system fails and you can't get parts or you can't make it operational, it's a long time before that system is back up and running.
Understood. That's good to know. That helps in making decisions. Thank you all.
So we're at 20 years with this equipment, correct?
That's correct. And the life cycle of this equipment is somewhere between 15 and 20 years. If a YMCA or a university can get 15 years out of it, that's pretty good. If a high school or a middle school can get 20 years out of the equipment, that's really good.
So I do plan on kind of showing what the net effect is to the budget we have been working on a little later on. I'm not going to pull it up right now. But I like I said, I did just want to point out that if we were able to do the lights with this debt, we would get rid of that $200,000 transfer. So it's actually potentially helping our budget next year. I understand we're adding debt to our debt load. But ultimately, I think as Greg had said, we don't have the funding to do this. So we're going to be adding debt to our debt load to do these projects.
And I guess, Jason, for the benefit of the new board members, as we look at 2026 forward and project out our overall debt load year over year, when we start to see those balloon payments of the $1 million in 6, what does that do to our overall debt payments as we look at budgets 10 years in the future?
Yeah, so if you look at column 9 here is our existing debt. And then column 10 would be our total debt by when you add in what I'm proposing here. So you'll see next year our debt load is $3.8 million. And it stays flat there for a few years. It does have a little bump up here in 24, but right around 3.8 here for the next 4 years. And then we start to see it slowly come down. So we go from 3.8 to 3.5. It stays at 3.5 for a few years, and it goes down to 3.4. And maintains that until the end of what our current existing debt is in 2030. So all of our debt right now, if we were to do nothing, would expire in 10 years, which is relatively current. That's not a bad position to be in. So I'm not concerned about, having 10 years out on our debt. When you look at the 10 or column 10 here, to Jason's point, we have basically flat debt payments here for the next 4 years, and then we start to see some small decreases in our payments.
Hey, Jason, this is Greg again. And just for new board members, that debt service is part of our base budget. That debt service,
Correct.
It's not like this is the first time that's come up. That is one of the line items, just like salaries and benefits. That debt service is part of last year's budget, and it'll be part of the budget for the next 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, so that's number 3, I think, in our big hitters. So when you see that 12% or whatever we come up with for debt, that's that number, correct?
Right. It's this currently it's this 3.715 number. That's
Yeah.
our debt. Yes.
Yep.
So I did want to add to this discussion then. Got to remember if I go up or down here. Oh, guess I go up. If we were to take this 3.3 million and add in the cash flow needed for the turf field, and I just wanted to point out what that was, and I think I mentioned the 130,000 at our last meeting. So this is increasing the bond payment if we were to take out the cash needed for the turf field, which would then create $131,000 increase to our debt for next year. But I know there was a few things. I've had some discussions with Dr. Eschbach in terms of some updates with that project. Eric, did you want to speak to a few things there?
Sure. As I had told the board on Tuesday night, we are having discussions with our donors. All the donors are indicating that they are that they continue to be supportive of the project, and some are saying that they're willing to be supportive as long as the project is done, within a reasonable time frame. But we've also had donors who have said, pushing this off until we know what the actual environment looks like from an economy standpoint would be helpful. I also reached out to our advisor on the RCAP grant, as I explained to you, and asked some additional questions, such as, can we apply the grant to a project that's already complete? The answer to that is that's very difficult to do. So you have to make sure that the project isn't 100% complete until that grant money comes through. Again, that grant money is something that we are in the queue to be eligible for. It's not something that we have secured. This advisor has indicated that he believes that that the money, the administration is still supportive of the money going in from the budget into the RCAP program. That is revitalization and community development. So that's that's something that I'm sure our leaders are going to want to infuse money into, but that it probably wouldn't become available to us until October. We would find out probably in August, September if we receive the grant. Probably wouldn't become available until October. So couple that with our discussion with our donors, and couple that with the fact that it would still be helpful to be able to raise some money. And I would recommend that we continue down the road of authorizing the administration to allow this project to go out to bid, but not to actually go out to bid until we have some more clarity on these issues. So, Jason and I talked about what would it look like if we were, if we knew more in October, November, where we were, and went out to bid, and how could we secure some money to help to fund that until it's complete and the grant money flows through and the donations flow through. Jason felt pretty comfortable with a time frame that would allow us to wait. So, questions on that?
Yeah, Eric, this is Greg. Obviously, there's no way that the project can even happen unless it's funded. But just because the board votes to fund it doesn't mean that we're going to borrow the money and do the project, because ultimately we still have to either accept the CoStar's bid or accept bid results. And we're not going to borrow the money until we actually have bid results or actually start construction. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So would you have an issue with building this into the budget, knowing that, I mean, we're only going to borrow the money unless the board approves it? I mean, it doesn't, just because it's part of the budget doesn't mean it's approved. It just means it's funded.
So this
on that question.
This is Beth. So Greg, are you saying to borrow the money so we can start the project? And I mean, wouldn't our funders be there to borrow for the money? And I guess I'm confused why we're anticipating having to borrow money at all.
Because the people that are donating the money are donating it over 3 years, and the foundation was trying to raise 1.2 million, and the balance was the district's obligation. So there was always some money the district was going to put out.
Can I just, this is Ann, can I just ask how that was established over a 3-year term for the donors to make their donations?
Yes, it was established through a process with the school board solicitor and best case recommendations on fundraising. So yeah, that was something that we had established early on and shared with the board early on.
So I have a question, and I asked Greg this. I emailed this to Greg, and I asked the question of, suppose we build the turf field before the 3 years is up, and then the donor says, "Oh, I can't afford it right now. My business is going belly up. I'm sorry." Who is fiscally responsible for that? Is it the district who's then responsible for that payment? Or because my understanding when I read the commitment letter is that they're not legally obligated to pay those payments. It's just a commitment letter, not a legally binding document. So are we holding the bag, so to speak, like I said in my email, for that money?
If the donors who sign the commitment letters choose not to give us the money, then we are not going to get the money from them. We'll have to get the money from another donor.
Or from the district. Right?
I think the goal was to try to raise 1.2 million. So I would think that the fundraising committee is going to keep going until we get there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in the board proposal I'm reading, it was 1.2 million, and the district was kicking in for the lights 380, and for less contingency about 500,000. So.
Yeah, well, actually, the lights have been donated now.
But it was 540,000 was the district's commitment. That was what we had designated needed to take place in order to bring that field up to, even if we just did it in natural grass, but to renovate that field to a playable surface.
Okay.
Yeah. My only suggestion to the board is, without funding it, it will never happen. But just because we build it into the budget doesn't mean we're going to take the money.
Well, I thought we were only building into the budget safety things.
Say that again, Beth.
I thought we were only building in the budget as it has to do with safety only. I mean, I guess I'm confused as our discussion last week where we said no extra spending, and now we're talking about building it in the budget. I guess I feel like we're talking in circles.
Well,
Yeah, I agree, Beth. That was my understanding as well, that we were focusing on anything that was safety or essential at this point in time till we felt like we were maybe in a better place to make some decisions. Because I mean, even after reading the email that we received from the Ken sent from Don Kiefer, that she's basically saying, hold off as much as possible and knowing that there's a lot of unknowns out there right now.
Well, if I can just add to it, I think ultimately, until either, in my opinion, one of two things happens: either the grant comes through for us, which would be fantastic, or the foundation is able to raise 1.2 or get close to it, and the board is willing to move forward with whatever they raise. Until one of those two things happens, or both. I think it's up to the board to say, well, we're going to wait until we have the funding to do that. I think what Greg is saying is, if that occurs, if the grant comes through in the fall, or if they're able to raise the 1.2 come the fall, I think he's saying we should have something built into the budget so that we're able to go and we're able to do this in the spring. Because we will need to take out debt for cash flow to get this project going. And it shows that financially, we have a commitment to make sure that this project will happen if they're able to come up with the funding, again, either through the donations or through the grant. So, I think what Greg is saying is build it into the budget so that it's there if these things occur and we can move forward. But if we don't build it into the budget, we're kind of saying we're definitely not doing it next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely no commitment on our part that we're spending anything. We're just simply putting it into the budget, correct?
Correct.
Absolutely. We have to accept either a bid result or a co-star's bid or something, but the board would have to take action to move forward with the project. My concern is that if we get an RCAP grant for $1 million and we've raised an additional 800,000, so the Polar Bear Foundation comes to the board and says, "Hey, we've raised $1.8 million," and the board says, "Oh, that's great. We didn't build it into the budget, so we're going to wait a year."
I guess as long as the board is allowed to move at its own pace, when if we build it into the budget, that we have parameters before we actually spend the money, and that the board is not being pressured to do something unwise, I don't have a problem with it. Jason, is it your recommendation that we do this?
Ultimately, whether or not we build it into the budget, I think we can move on new debt whenever we needed to. Again, the budget is a guide for us and a plan for us, but the plan never works out 100%. So, whether we build it in or not, I don't think it has an effect in terms of actually taking the money out. But I think to Greg's point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, if I'm misstating, but I think the Greg's point is we need to show that the district is ready to move when the project can move. And so, frankly, I don't know if it has to be put in the budget. I think, if we cut to the spring and we say, hey, we're going to take out the extra, 1.7 million, come spring, the interest amount on that for the 2021 budget is going to be very small. And potentially you could delay the interest payment until 21-22. So I think from a financial standpoint, I don't know if it really matters, but if Greg's looking at it from a commitment standpoint, I can understand that rationale.
Yeah, my only concern was that if we get to the point where we've raised in excess of 1.2, and then the board says, well, that's great, but we're not going to take any new debt out until the next budget cycle, we've missed an opportunity.
I guess I would say, even if it's in the budget, the board could still say that. Until we bring the note and sign the papers on whatever that debt looks like, it's up to the vote on that actual debt. So whether it's in the budget or not is, I don't say it's irrelevant, but it's dependent upon when the debt is to be taken out and whatever the board decides to take out at that time.
So, Greg, are you saying perceptually we want it seen that the district is still committed? I understand that. And I want it known, I am not against a turf field, and I want to reiterate that, as I'm for a turf field if it's fiscally responsible decision. So I am absolutely for it. But I just want to make sure we're not going down a road and starting to, the windows crack, so now we can do the next step and the next step without allowing us an opportunity to say, whoa, this is, we need to be able to just see what's going on. But if perceptually, for commitment purposes, I do understand that. I can see why donors might want to know that the district is still wanting to go forward. So
I think this would go a long way with the donors to know that it's part of the budget. We don't actually have to take the money or borrow the money and incur any debt until the board actually votes to move forward, either through co-stars or through a bid that comes in. But the simple fact that we've put it in the budget, I think that goes a long way to be able to go back to the donors and say, can you please stick around for another year for us?
I guess I'm a little confused because I thought that they understood that the district is obviously definitely committed to doing this project. I think that's all our intent. I guess I'm just a little concerned, from the fact we don't know what the grant is, and there's a lot of unknowns at this point. And if Jason is saying we can go and ask for the money at any point, I'm a little baffled why we wouldn't just wait till we know a little bit more.
Well, as long as the board is happy to take debt during the middle of a year that's not budgeted, I'm okay with that.
But isn't it going to be a debt anyway? Isn't it going to be a debt anyway because we're already $1 million behind in our budget? So anything, if we add it to the budget, we're just adding 400,000 more in what we have to make up? I mean, guess what I don't understand.
No, we would be taking debt anyway. To your
Okay.
point, yes, we would 100% be taking debt anyway.
So we'd be taking debt. We'd be taking extra debt for the turf field, is what you're saying.
Correct.
So we're adding on debt for a kind of why would we add on debt? Why wouldn't we wait until we have the money? Maybe that's where I'm confused.
Well, even if we have, I guess even if we have the money, we'll still incur some type of debt because we'll have the money that the district has to contribute regardless. It's just a matter of what is the debt. I almost feel like I would be more comfortable, and I'm only speaking for myself here, obviously, that I would say that the district is still committed, see how things play out in the economy, and then take on the debt when we feel a little bit more comfortable with where things are.
And I don't think anybody is arguing that. In fact, I think that's what everybody has said. It's just whether you show it in the budget or not. The question as to don't the donors know that we're committed? The only way they know that we're committed is by word of mouth and by a motion that says we'll allow this to we'll allow the study of this, and we're committed to $500,000. They don't. There's nothing in any board documentation or any minutes that says that there's an official commitment to this. And to Greg's point, by building this in the budget, it would communicate that commitment, but we would not incur the debt until we're ready, until we have the money and we're ready to go.
So what's the rest of the board think? It seems to have been Ann, Greg, and I, and a little bit of Ken.
I just have a question. If we wait to incur the debt later, are the interest rates really low right now that it would be smarter to do it now?
So we're not actually incurring any debt.
No, we're not.
Until we actually move forward with the project. All we're doing is we're showing as part of our budget debt service for this project. But if the project doesn't go through, what's going to happen is all of the other ones, the debt service in the first year was $71,000. So we'll have a net positive $60,000 to the budget. If you want to scroll back to the other page, Jason. So if nothing happens, I'm sorry, $87,000. So if nothing happens, if we don't move forward with the project, we don't borrow the money for the turf field, but we borrow the money to do the other projects, we will end up at the end of the year having a net the difference between $87,000 and $170,000. So we will show a net savings to the budget. We're not incurring any debt until the board actually votes to take the debt.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand
We're
now.
simply budgeting it. That's all we're doing.
And again, I have another question. I'm sorry, Eric, but I thought at our last meeting, we also talked about, when we said, does it make sense to bid this or to go through kind of like a co-stars contract, if you will, to see if we can get some closer pricing. And I thought that was not necessarily that I feel like it has to go out to bid, but that you can take advantage of those contracts and see if the pricing that we received or the estimate we received from Crabtree is as accurate as they think it is.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the plan. So I'm going to ask on Tuesday night for you to approve the authorization to go out to bid, but we're not going out to bid yet. We want to provide the state contract. Greg refers to that as co-stars, which is the state contract list. We want to provide that to the vendors that are on that list that do the turf fields, and they will give us a bid. It's no cost to us to get that bid. They will give us that bid, and then we'll have some definite numbers. Now, if you recall from the roofing project, we said, well, let's see if we can get it an even lower price. And you remember Alyssa said last week that from what she's hearing, we might be able to get lower prices because of the of the environment and the economy. So we might decide to go out to bid on that. But we won't do that without communicating that to the board and without knowing that that we're getting closer to a point where we have an understanding of what our donations are and what that grant is and what an actual cost is.
So Eric,
Sorry, this is Greg. When I say bid, I didn't mean PlanCon public bid. I'm collectively saying whether it's CoStar bid or PlanCon bid. I'm lumping both of them into the same category.
Okay, because I was looking at those as two separate things, personally. So when we're looking at approving this to go out to bid, Eric, you're saying you're not looking to do that. You want to wait a little bit till it actually goes out to bid, or you get your pricing from CoStars, the state, however you want to refer to it.
Exactly. I just want that in place so that when we can go out to bid, we don't have to wait, until the next board meeting for that authorization, that we can do it at a time that we believe would be the best for securing bids. And we all know that sometimes, if we're doing that in the fall and getting and going out to bid in the fall for a project that will be completed in the following summer, you'd probably get a more favorable price than if you were going out to bid for something that needed to be done in the next month. So it's just a proactive approach, but it would definitely be done in consultation with the board.
So the bids, I guess you're saying, I guess I'm confused. When you started out talking, you said the bids would go out in the fall, but now you're saying you want to do it in the next month or find out the CoStar now? You said the fall only because that's when we'd find out about the, the RCAP business.
I must be confusing people more than I'm explaining. So if somebody else wants to chime in and do a better job than I am, please do.
Yeah. So I think what the plan is here is that they're going to go to the state contracts here within the next month or so to get us an idea as to what the costs look like through the state contracts. Then once we hit fall, and hopefully we have some clarification from RCAP, maybe we have some more clarification on fundraising that continues to increase, then we can determine what we think the actual costs are going to be based on those state contracts. and with an update to the revenue side of things, the board can then decide, and I don't know when that'll be, we're just using the term fall, whether or not they truly want to go out for bid because the revenues are now in place and we want to potentially get better bids than what the state contract can do. That's what would happen in the fall. Once all that would occur, and let's say we have the funding and we get good bids and everybody's happy with all of that, then we would move forward with the debt based on those bids, and then payments to that debt really probably wouldn't occur until maybe May of 21. And the project would then also occur in spring, summer of 21. So I think that's kind of the timeline that Eric's trying to lay out.
Thank you. I do understand now. Sorry, Eric.
Yeah, so this is Joe. I can support going out and getting going through what we're referring to as the co-stars to get maybe a little better idea.
Yeah.
And just as Greg is, others are trying to be careful with how we present to the donors, I'm actually very, I don't know if concern is the right word, but I want to be very cautious about saying that that we're going out to bid the project, because I think in the public, when I hear project is out for bid, it's going to be bid and it's going to be awarded and it's going to be constructed, in like month. So I'm not sure that if we're only giving approval to do that first step to get a better idea of cost, I can get behind that. And then I would think the board could still at a later date say, okay, now's the time we're allowing it to go out for bid. We're getting away from the budget discussion, but whether we have that already in the budget or not.
No, Joe, you're exactly right. The board would take action to go out for bids, whenever that is, whether it's in the fall or whenever the board chooses to do that. They would have to take action to do that bidding.
Yeah, and in addition to that, Jason, the board would have to take action to accept the bid results.
Correct. And the board would have to take action to accept or to take out the debt. So there's a lot of board actions that would have to
There's a whole lot of steps that still have to be done, correct?
Right.
Exactly.
But those 3 steps, when we do one of those, our intent is to do all 3, in my opinion. Like, I would
Correct.
never put a job out for bid intending to say, unless it's halfway, we think we're going to not take the bids. So.
Well, that does happen. I agree with you, though. It's usually not the intent. This is Kevin. I'll restate what I said the night we approved moving forward when we had the floor there filled with the field hockey and soccer teams. That I'm okay with moving forward the entire time as long as we stay on path with the objectives we set, which is raising the money and making a fiscally responsible decision each step of the way. So I see nothing right now that tells me we shouldn't continue to move forward. But if the money ends up not being there at the end of the day, then I have no problem pulling the plug either. So I'm fine with moving forward at this point.
Hey, this is Jamie. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I always feel like I need to ask. I guess, again, as a new board member, this is all just blowing my mind. So I get why we want to bid. I do understand what everyone's saying. I understand both sides of it. But I guess as a parent in the community, not looking at it as a board member, I'm going to hear that the board is outsourcing positions and rearranging some jobs and maybe some salaries and maybe some programs. And then I'm going to read in the banner that, oh, we awarded a bid to ABC Company to start a new turf project. And, potentially 6-7 months from now or before the end of the next school year, break ground on a new turf field when we just totally disrupted a third of our employees in the district. As a parent, that makes me very sad that the board would even be considering a turf project. And again, I'm coming into this 80% of the way through the turf project, but it just doesn't make sense to me that, I don't know, that we would even be spending the last 35 minutes on this. But I understand both sides, and I understand it needs to be done.
So Jamie, this is Greg. If we get $1 million RCAP grant in October, and the foundation has raised 900,000, and it costs $0 to the district to put the turf field in. If we don't at some point have a way to over a 3-year period borrow money to do the project while the commitments are coming in and while we're waiting for the state grant money to come in, we can never do the project even though there's no cost to the district.
Okay. Okay, I mean, again, there's just a lot of steps that need to happen, and I'm just trying to follow along the ladder here. It's a little
Yeah.
hard.
I think the other I was just gonna say, I think the other factor too was that we looked at it through the lens that we're gonna have to spend money on Bostic either way. So that was the amount of money I understood that we were willing to commit towards the project. That it was money that was going to have to be spent.
Yes, and Kevin, this is Jason. That was to the new board members that are here. This conversation has been had over many years. But the back stadium, not Bostic, is currently in disrepair. The natural turf would have to be replaced, and the cost that about $500,000 figure that you've heard talked about is the projected cost to replace the natural turf. So what we have said over really about 18 months now is we would not incur any costs above that, and any difference from that would be fundraised or raised through the grant process. And that was considered to be money we're going to spend anyway to have an athletic field in that back stadium. And so it's not, turf versus natural. That mill is going to have to happen in the next 12 to 18 months.
And that was September's board meeting where that option and admin recommendation came, and there's a summary document for that breaks down at that time, 7 months ago, 1.7 total, 1.2 from fundraising and 560,000 from the district. So that was back in a document from the September 2019 board meeting.
Yeah, so if I can just try to wrap this up so we can keep moving, all we're doing here is budgeting money. We are not approving the project for bid. We are not accepting a bid, and we are not taking out debt. We are simply building it into the budget to give the ability to the district to do the project at some point in the next fiscal year. It may not even happen in this next coming fiscal year. I can't predict that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on that grant. I think as the grant goes, so goes Northern, in my opinion. It's there. We're in the queue. It's just a matter of time. Will they fund it? I think in 6 months we should have a better idea what that grant is going to look like.
Yep, and if the foundation comes up with another $300,000 of private donors and we're sitting at 1.2 million, then the board can make the decision. Then let's move forward.
Yeah, I would definitely like to move ahead. I mean, we've definitely gone into. I knew it would be a discussion, and that's fine. And I know there's several board members that are kind of trying to get caught up on the whole turf field issue and project, and I don't want that to be the focus of tonight's meeting. There's a lot of other meetings that we'll have that will need to have votes and approvals for that. So I'd rather try to stay focused on some more pressing issues right now. So I did want to move forward. The last item I had for the public comment for the public meeting was any other cost center discussions. I know I shot a whole bunch of those out to the board here within the last week. I did not get any questions via emails. I'm sure some of you probably haven't had a chance to look at all of that yet, and that's fine. Was there anything from any of those cost centers that any board member wanted to bring up this evening? Okay, hearing none. That is all I had for the public portion. I would like for us to move to the executive session and be able to talk about some of our personnel items here for the budget. So I think
Thank
we're
you,
okay.
Jason. So we are going to conclude this meeting for our public people that are in attendance. Executive session will be held by the board. That is not a public meeting. No action will be taken during that meeting. It is solely for the purpose of discussing personnel matters. Thank you. We'll conclude this meeting. I will stop recording and we will be posting this on our website shortly.